Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest album from Grand Magus entitled Wolf God. Because as we all know, there's no better way to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus goddamn Christ than by playing some goddamn heavy fucking metal. This is their band's 9th studio album over the course of 18 years. And in those years, Grand Magus have stuck to a pretty standard formula. Big epic heavy metal in the vein of Manowar with big hooks and big riffs, but with a more doom metal centric bass, giving it a little bit more weight and just a little bit of an extra spice to deviate from Manowar and other bands of that style. Originally more doom-centric in their early years, but nonetheless, it's a pretty standard template that they have used and mostly expanded upon throughout their career. I say mostly because in these last few years, with these last few records, Grand Magus have slowly been sliding into a pretty comfortable rut. They've been expanding less and less and sticking very stubbornly to their trademark sound, which isn't inherently a bad thing so long as you can keep the quality up. I mean, bands like Cannibal Corpse, Overkill, and Motorhead have consistently delivered arguably the same record over and over and have consistently done enough with them that no one has cared. But now we're at the point where the quality is beginning to take a legitimate hit. And it's not even because of the band's unadventurous songwriting. It has more to do with the fact that on this album, Wolf God, Grand Magus sound like they don't give a fuck. There's not a lot of energy, enthusiasm, or life at all on this record. They sound like a band going through the motions. They sound like they're being held against their will. The riffs feel flat and empty. The drums have no weight behind them. The choruses don't carry any passion, and that's without even addressing, again, just how unadventurous this songwriting has become. Not only have Grand Magus found themselves in a real creative rut, they've also found themselves in a real energetic rut, marking, in my opinion, maybe their worst record. And that being said, if you're a pretty conservative meat and potatoes heavy metal kind of guy, and you're not looking for anything that open-minded or spicy or adventurous, then this record isn't inherently bad for you, at least. All of the things that Grand Magus is known for is reflected here. Songs like Glory to the Brave and To Live and Die in Solitude, for instance, do a pretty good job at recapturing the Grand Magus vibes, despite not sounding particularly original or inspired. The former track in particular actually has one of the strongest choruses on the entire album. It's going to be one of those songs as well that you see a bunch of fucking white jocks put on their gym playlist as well, just because of the iron pumping riffs and just how big and semi-inspired that chorus is. It's the closest thing to energy I hear on this entire record. I also think for the most part the vocals turn out pretty well. I mean, Jane J.B. Christopherson here, he's not exactly giving it 100%, but he is at least maybe giving it 70%. He sounds somewhat convincing even if he doesn't necessarily feel convincing, if that makes any sense. And everything I've talked about, from the band's formula to the band's vocals, comes together perhaps most effectively for me on a hall clad in gold, which feels a bit more stoic and rustic and probably is the closest to the band doing anything semi-different on this record. It's enough to at least get me engaged. But for me, everything else on this record is uninspired, it's unoriginal. The band practically ripped themselves off on a number of songs, just taking riffs and recycling them from previous records. Take, for instance, the openings track and also the title track of this record, Wolf God, which bears a riff that is way too identical to the band's classic Iron Will, which frankly is made all the more glaringly obvious by the band's absolutely ridiculous opening interlude on this album. It sounds like a shanty left over from Pirates of the Caribbean, injected with Renaissance flair. It sounds so bad. The band repeats this on Dawn of Fire, which conceptually acts as a grab bag of war metal cliches and tropes with, I swear, a riff that I've heard somewhere from Grand Magus in the past. It just sounds too fucking similar. Or a song like Brother of the Storm, where the band has clearly been spending some time with Visigoth, to the point where I would argue Visigoth deserve a songwriting credit on this fucking thing. It is a little glaring how similar it is. Another good example of this, He Sent Them to Hell, which sees the band plagiarizing another one of their own songs, specifically Steel vs. Steel from the Triumph and Power record. And then there's filler tracks like Untamed and Spearthrower, which attempt to up the urgency, but fall fall flat simply because of how dull and lifeless they are. Grand Magus has several times in the past shown that they are good at writing heavy metal, even if they're not the most artistically expressive about it. They are capable of writing good choruses, good riffs, and giving you your fucking meat and potatoes with no hustle and no issue. Which is why it's such a mystery to me that the band now find themselves in this position where they are so uninspired and uninteresting. What happened to them in between albums? Like, did somebody die? Did the band almost break up? Are they being forced to do this? Do they want to be here? I don't know, and I don't have answers, and it's troubling. Whatever the case may be, if this is what we can expect from future Grand Magus records, I'm clocking out, because all things considered, even if this was competent, it's still ultimately unessential, because Grand Magus have made better records than this in the past. And then, again, keeping in mind just how unadventurous it is, and lazy it is at times, and how it lacks just any energy and fire or life at all, and it brings down a pretty average meat and potatoes heavy metal record to a genuinely poorly constructed and almost embarrassing heavy metal record. So I'm going with a 1.5 out of 5. I really don't see any reason why any Grand Magus fan should go out of their way to pick up this record, again, unless you're super not picky about where you get your heavy metal from. Because this record, as I said, is unessential. They've made stronger records than this, more interesting, engaging, and expansive records from this. And there's no reason why you shouldn't revisit those records instead of listening to this. There's literally no reason unless you are a bona fide die-hard fan. To be honest, I wouldn't even be as hard on this if it wasn't for the fact that the band kind of go out of their way to repeat and recycle riffs, to recapture the glory days of this band. Like, there's no need to be ripping yourselves off to be plagiarizing your own music. Just write some decent fucking riffs. Like, get in a room, drink some beer, have some fun, make a record. It doesn't seem that difficult to me, all right? This type of music, it's not exactly rocket science. Like I said, if this is what we can expect from future Grand Magus albums, then I'm out, because frankly, there are way more interesting records and way more interesting new bands to check out. The band themselves have made way more interesting, way more engaging, way more adventurous and expansive and unique records. So fuck it, there's literally no need, no reason for me whatsoever to continue checking out Grand Magus. And that is not a good sign. I'm hoping they get their shit together, but for now, 1.5 out of 5, this is a bad album. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.